Da, 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 da. Enemy patrol. So, like I said in the last video, we're now actually going to put some enemies onto our game. Now, at this stage, the only jeopardy really is the fact that the time goes down and I go to the game over screen. But what we're going to do, we're going to add some enemies like these guys down here. And if I just zoom in on them so you can see how terrifying they actually look, I'm going to use these to actually walk around the screen. At this point, we're not actually going to cause any damage to the player, or we're not going to cause any damage to the enemies. We're just trying to get them to move around and look menacing then, okay? Now, this video is going to be kind of made up of a few different things. We're going to have an enemy, which is going to be moving back and forth, so between two places, 2 points on the screen, that is. There will be a couple of issues we need to talk about as and when we get to that point. We're also going to have the enemy moving between several points on the screen, so it looks as if it's kind of like patrolling a certain area. And we're also going to talk about how we can get it to randomly move around the screen. So, like I said, at this point, we're not doing any interaction with the player. We're just trying to get an enemy in to kind of do what it needs to do, walking around. And then we'll talk about how it kind of attacks the player and how it causes damage to the player, stuff like that in the next few videos. But more importantly, at this point, I'm just going to grab my sheep, which is the main, everyone knows is the farmyard nemesis of a chicken. And I'm just going to scale it so it's the same size as my chicken. You don't have to do this, it's just something I want to do. So with the sheep itself, and if I just double click on it so you can get a good look at him, I'm going to add a rigid body. It's going to be a 2D rigid body. And I'm going to make sure that the gravity scale is set to 0. And I'm going to freeze the rotation on the Z so when it does bump into things, it doesn't go tumbling all over the place. And the only thing I need to do at this stage is also add a collider. And I'm going to add a Polygon Collider because, as you can see, it's a bit more accurate in terms of when it bumps into things, stuff like that. Now then, I'm going to zoom out a little bit first of all. So if I double click on main camera, and what I'm going to do first is actually place 2 points on the screen, and the sheep is going to walk in between those 2 points. So to do that, I'm going to add an empty, and this is going to be called sheep point A, because I might do something similar for the donkey, goat, and the horse. Now, you can't actually see the sheep point A, because as soon as I click away from it, you can't actually see it there at all. So the way to make it visible, because it's an empty object at this point, remember, if I click on this here, and I can choose, let's choose, that's a bit too big, that red one there. Let's choose that one there, and I'll click away from it. Then you can see the point on the screen. So if I actually zoomed in, you can see it a bit better. And that's sheep point A. I'm also going to duplicate this on the side. And I'm going to have sheep point B. Because I've duplicated it, we'll also have a tag, and I'm going to put this one that side there. And the idea is the code we're now going to put onto the sheep will make it go between these 2 points continuously. So I'm going to add a script to the sheep called enemy patrol. Maybe I should call it sheep enemy patrol actually, because I'm going to have different enemies doing different things. We let that open up in Visual Studio as well once it decides to kick in. And in Visual Studio then, we are going to be keeping these two at the top because they will actually have a big impact about something we're going to do in as we go through this video. But I am going to go and pinch what I've got set up in here. And I'll quickly talk you through it to some extent as well, as best I can in terms of my understanding of it. So back on Visual Studio. I've pasted that code in. The idea is we're identifying the points, point A and point B. We're identifying the sheep with its rigid body, and we're identifying where it is currently standing. And there will be a speed involved with this as well in terms of how fast the sheep will move. When the code starts, it identifies the rigid body, as in the sheep. It identifies what the current point is. And then in the update, it basically says, whichever one you are closest to, or head towards point A first of all, and I think that's what this bit is down here, kind of. And when we get close to point B or that point, it makes us turn around and head back towards the other point there. So make sure the syntax and everything is right. I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back onto Unity. Let it do what it's got to do. Everything's looking okay at this stage, and I'm going to click on this. And you'll notice that point A, point B, and speed is over here. So I will need to drag across what my point A is, drag across what my point B is, and also put a speed. So I'm just going to put 5. I'm not 100% sure how it's going to work at this stage. And one thing I am going to do, because the sheep is currently outside of the camera, I've got script already set up so the camera will follow the player. So if I drop the player there and press play, then you'll see that the sheep starts going in between those 2 points. Now it will bump into me, but it can't do me any damage or anything at this stage. I can try to move it, but it will still head back to those points. So there is some interactivity, but obviously at this stage, no damage is done either way. Still a bit odd though for two reasons: that it's kind of walking backwards to this point, it's walking forwards to that point, which looks fine. And really, in terms of a patrol, you want it to kind of pause, so it basically stops at that point before it decides to turn around and go back to the other point. So a couple of ways we're going to look at fixing this. So we're going to come back onto the script in a moment, and we're going to add a couple of things here. So this part will be to make it kind of like pause. So I've got that bit at the top. I didn't delete it out, but we're going to call something called a coroutine. So these coroutines are kind of like calls to procedures. But these procedures then are, that's probably best if I copy all that, because otherwise you're just watching me copying and pasting. And you can kind of copy over this yourself. But what you'll notice is a lot of the stuff, apart from the bits which are highlighted, are what you've already typed out. So it saves you having to type it out again. But anyway, when I pop this in place of the void update, and like I said, I'll pause it there so you can, well, you can pause it yourself to look at that to see how it works. This will make the sheep or the enemy pause for 2 seconds when it gets to each of those points. So I'm going to press Control S to save it. Back onto Unity. Nothing should really change over on the right-hand side. But when I press play this time, we hopefully have fixed one of the problems. So it gets to that first point and stops for 2 seconds, and then stops for 2 seconds at that point and keeps going like that. But obviously at this point, that bit works, but it kind of isn't facing the same way or the correct way. So the next bit to fix, back on here, if I just scroll down a little bit, not much to add to it at all, in fact. It is literally just these lines here. So if I copy these, and they get pasted after this yield, return new, wait for a second. So basically that line there, they will go into that and they will save, and then we'll go back onto here. Now, there will be another issue with this, but I just want to show you how to fix it in case it doesn't quite fit your game like it doesn't quite fit mine. So he moves to point A, he comes to point B backwards, so that doesn't seem like it's working. But from this point, so it goes up to point A, it does it backwards. Point B, it goes backwards. So basically, it's kind of doing what it's supposed to do, but it's not flipping at the right order. So down here where I've got the 1 and the -1, I just need to swap those over. I'll save that, come back onto here, and this time when I press play, it will go between those 2 points at the speed of 5, and it will pause for 2 seconds, and it'll flip and face the correct way. Okay? Now you might be thinking that's lovely. However, I don't want my enemy just to scroll between 2 points. I might want it to scroll between or patrol between several points. So what I'm going to do as an example, I'm going to duplicate that one there, change that to it as sheep point C, and we're going to move that guy to there. I'm also going to do the same for that one there and do sheep points D. And then we're just going to quickly change the code. So you can put in as many points as you want. If you really want to go into detail, you could have like 100 points if you really wanted to, if you've got the time to spend doing that. But in terms of the script then, in terms of what we need to do to change it so it does go between multiple points, we need to basically change a couple of things on it. So this time you will have to watch me do bits and pieces. So I'm going to get rid of, at the top here, game point A and game point B and replace it with that. I'm also going to take this bit as well, and I think that is going to replace that part. I'm just double checking this as I go back and forth. Yeah, that looks fine. And within our start area, we're basically going to overwrite these 2 lines, and you'll know that that second line is actually part of that there. Let's get rid of that extra space. Within our IE enumerator patrol code. So this is basically code, IE enumerator and the start coroutine, where there is a timer involved. I should have explained this a bit earlier. So anything which has got a pause, so this yield, wait for seconds, that's where you have to use this IE enumerator. So you might come across those a couple of times. So anyway, I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it there. And I'm also going to take the word target point and replace where it says current point there and current point there. And a couple little things left got to do. I think it's just these two bits here. I'm going to take those two lines. So this is going to go underneath the yield return new line. So yield return new. I think I hover over. Let me just double check something in a minute. Don't end up getting rid of something I shouldn't. Yeah, I think actually it's those two line. I think that line's got to go actually. Let's get rid of that line. That goes after there. 'Cause I'm confusing myself now. And let's just double check. So the scale bit's fine. The transform bit is fine. And I think I just need to take that last bit and replace this bit here, I believe. So if I press save to that, come back on here, we'll see if it's wrong because it'll kick off. And again, you maybe want to kind of like pause at certain points here to look at the code to make sure it's kind of done in the right order. And then if I come back onto this, like where are we to? Now you'll notice on the sheep, we've got sheep patrol points. How many patrol points you want? So I've got 4 patrol points. I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to drag across point A, point B. Or if I wanted to, I could click on this circle on the end and go and find it here. Point C and point D. And the speed's already set to 5. In fact, I'm going to increase the speed of that because otherwise we're going to be watching if ages going back and forth. Sometimes if you do the speed too quick, it actually goes through a point. So it didn't that time, because it's gone between point A, point B, point C will be down here. There he goes. And point D is back straight in the line where I am. So I'm going to get out of the way. And I think then it will go back up to point A. So you can have multiple points. Now, the last thing I want to show you, if you want your enemy to be randomly moving around and bumping into things and actually kind of changing its direction, the last bit I want you to look at, and again, you can just take what you need from this. I'm going to literally hover over all of these, and some of these again might be things which are already on the code. But if I highlight everything from this point up to there, and I think that'll be okay. Right, so there's the code there, and basically what it means is it will move randomly between things. And I just want to scroll across this side so you can see those bits as well. I'm going to save that, come back onto Unity. I know this video is getting on a bit, I do apologize. But this time, all those bits disappear, so I don't need these points anymore. I can actually get rid of them. And in fact, when I press play, you can't see the points on the screen. But now this will randomly move around the place. And even when it bumps into something, it's pausing for 2 seconds, and then it's moving around like that. So you could reduce the amount of pause duration. So if I change that to like 0.5 maybe, then it starts to move a bit quicker. And maybe if I change the speed so it is like 3, so it seems like more like a randomly moving animal. So you could do that for an enemy. You could actually do it for scenery, if that makes sense. You could have like a flock of sheep just wandering around, if that's what you want to do. So that's how you do enemy patrols. Next one up will be enemy pursuit. So when we get too close to the enemy, it's actually going to run at us and give us a load of grief.